Welcome everyone to the APA National PTA webinar, Talking with Teens About Stress Management. We're so glad to have you here with us this evening. My name is Erin Thwaites and I'm a Program Specialist in National PTA. During this presentation, we'll be hearing from Dr. David Palmiter about the findings from the American Psychological Association's 2013 Stress in America survey. We'll be learning about how teens experience stress, what it can mean for their health, and then we will review some strategies for managing stress in a healthy and positive way. At the conclusion of this presentation, Dr. Palmiter will be taking questions from the audience and answering them. Throughout the presentation, you'll be muted, but you can enter your questions into the questions box in the sidebar. Before we go any further, let's review some of the functionalities of GoToWebinar in case you haven't used it before. Right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid any background noises that may distract you from listening to the webinar. Throughout the presentation, someone on staff will be managing the chat functionality. You can enter your questions and comments into the question box. Go ahead and highlight it here. Right in the red circle is where you can enter your questions. And then at the end of the presentation, I will be reading these questions to Dr. Palmiter so that he can answer them. If you have any technical issues that you need to be resolved throughout the presentation, you may receive a typed response from the staff in this window when you enter in your question. Now I'd like to welcome our National PTA President, President Otha Thornton, and he'll be kicking us off.
Hello, I would like to welcome everyone here tonight, and in conjunction with the American Psychological Association, we thank you for spending your evening here with us, talking with teens about stress management. I would like to thank our staff, Heather Parker, Heather Parker, and also Erin Thwaites for the work that they're doing, and I thank the panelists for joining us this evening. We look forward to a great conversation. Thank you very much. Erin?
Thank you so much, Otha. Our expert speaker tonight, as Otha mentioned, is Dr. David Palmiter. Dr. Palmiter is a clinical psychologist and a fellow of the American Psychological Association. He is professor of psychology at Marywood University, treats teens and adolescents in his private practice, and is a public education coordinator for the American Psychological Association. Dr. Palmiter is also the author of an award-winning parenting book titled Working Parents, Thriving Families, and is a member of the 2013 APA Stress in America team, which surveyed and reported on teens and stress. Without further ado, welcome Dr. Palmiter.
Thank you, and thanks to the PTA and APA for having me on tonight. I'm very excited to be here. And as I talk, I just imagine that most of you out there are multitasking. You know, you might be cleaning up from dinner or doing some work from today or tomorrow or keeping a stink eye on your teen as he or she finishes up homework. So I appreciate how busy everybody is, and I'm going to try to make this very practical. I'm going to be short and sweet in the presentation here, and then we're going to have lots of time for dialogue. Okay, first slide, please. So what's stress? I have a colleague at Marywood, Dr. Tracy Pacel, that has a great metaphor for this. And think of ourselves like an egg. And if our egg breaks, a condition develops like depression or anxiety. So stress are those factors that tap on the egg. So for teens, getting homework done, worries about college, dating, these things tap on the egg. Stress management factors, resilience factors, block that tapping or weaken it. And we're going to cover what some of those are tonight. Then also a factor is how thick the shell is on the egg. Certain part of the shell might be thicker. So there's no family history for depression in my family. And so my chances of developing a mood disorder are lesser because of that. So that part of my shell is thick. Alternatively, another part of the egg, my shell may be very thin because there's a strong history of anxiety that runs through both families. So it takes less stress for that disorder to develop because of that vulnerability. So think about stress as those three factors: things tapping on the egg, things blocking or weakening the tapping, and then the thickening of the egg itself. We also know that when stress hits, it triggers a very old response in us, a fight-flight. Centuries ago, or thousands of years ago, humans had to have very quick responses in the face of danger. So if you walked into an open field and there's a saber-toothed tiger, you needed quick, fast response, quick blood flow to the brain for decision making. Do I fight? Do I run? You don't need to digest so much, so the blood might leave your stomach. I mean, the saber-toothed tiger might need blood for digesting, but you don't. And that blood goes to the arms and legs for running, for fighting, that kind of thing. So these things happen very quickly. The complication in contemporary culture is sometimes we need a real fight-flight response. There's a true danger. There's a fire in the house. But a lot of other times we're imagining that a kitten is a tiger, or teens do this. So a teen might equate SAT tests with a saber-toothed tiger, and so their body's having the exact same reaction as if they had a very serious threat coming their way. Next slide. So we know that that everybody experiences stress, and it can actually be a good thing. Stress can keep you from doing things so that you avoid the saber-toothed tiger to begin with, or can motivate you to do things so that you fly high and well and achieve in life. So it's a good thing. It's only when it exceeds our capacities for managing it that the egg might break. It does tax, however, just about every system in the body. Cardiovascular, respiratory, reproductive systems. There really isn't a part of the body that stress doesn't impact. Next slide. Now, one of the things a previous edition, a 2010 edition of our survey found is that we parents underestimate our kids' stress. This is a consistent finding in the literature and also my clinical practice. And I think it happens for a primary reason. We love our kids so much, it makes us crazy. So when I'm writing or talking about parenting, I prefer the term parent-lunatic. I think we love our kids so much, it makes us crazy people. I mean, no engaged parent is happier than their least happy child, right? So that's one thing. So if my kid's hurting, often I'm hurting worse, and I don't like to hurt. Another thing is our science suggests that we're shepherds to our children in terms of their outcomes, but our crazy love makes us thinking we're sculptors. So when something bad happens, somehow, some way, I think or suspect I'm at fault, that maybe if I'd been on my game better as a parent, my kid wouldn't be hurting. And so these things cause me to have a hard time sometimes seeing the stress, even though I care so deeply, so thoroughly about my child. So if we can accept that we're all in this club, this parent lunatic club, and look at the question more objectively, we can look at what do our teens tell us that they're feeling in terms of their stress. In our 2013 survey, Stress in America survey that we do every year now, surveyed a national sample of over 1,000 teens and asked them about their stress. So let's look a little at that. Next slide. One of the things we did is we asked teens to just estimate what do you think is a healthy amount of stress on a 10-point scale, and they put that number at 3.9, and that's the dotted horizontal line that you see on the left side there. On the right side are the adult numbers. So teens are saying that during the school year they're at a 5.8, well above that 3.9, but even during the summers they're at a 4.6. So they're telling us by their ratings that they're experiencing more stress than they think is good. That's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the next slide. Next slide, please. Where we see that we ask them, okay, so what do you think the impact of stress is on your health? And 54% of them are saying they don't think it's a big deal with physical health, and 52% say it's not a big deal with their mental health. Well, that's just factually wrong. And it suggests that our teens need to learn a lot about not only their stress, the signs of it, how it impacts them, and what they can do better to manage it. Next slide. Interestingly, though, teens are also reporting that they're experiencing their stress as being on the increase. So only 16% reported that their stress level declined in the last year, while about a third to 31% say it increased. And 34% say they expect their stress to increase in the next year. And we'll talk about some of what those top stresses are perhaps later on. And I'll also talk about some of the signs of that stress. Next slide. Nearly half of teens say either they aren't doing enough or aren't sure they're doing enough to manage their stress. And more than 10% say they never set aside time to manage it. We also see that when teens are left to their own devices, they do a lot of times do things that really don't manage stress. Like they do a lot of sedentary activities, like playing video games, surfing the net, rather than things that work, that our science shows work, like physical activity. And this slide makes this particular point. It's interesting that teens who exercised once or more per week reported lower stress levels in the past month than peers who exercised less. And 20% of teens reported exercising less than once a week or not at all. Several authoritative bodies have recommended the dose we want for kids is an hour a day of sweating and breathing hard. But we're seeing that a lot of kids are not getting that level of activity. Next slide, please. We're also seeing, and this is another consistent finding across research in stress, that teen girls are reporting higher levels of stress than teen boys are. Some of that is probably due to girls either being more aware of their internal life, more willing to talk about it, but there also seems to be some of that stress that's because of pressures girls are facing that maybe boys aren't. Perhaps issues about body image, and perhaps this double bind we put in with young women saying, okay, be assertive, be forward in what you think, but do it in a way that doesn't compromise what we think your femininity ought to be. So there's these kind of double binds that young women sometimes find themselves in. I see that a lot as a college professor of undergraduates. Next slide, please. It's interesting that stress, when it really becomes pervasive in a person, attacks even things that are traditionally considered healthy activities, like eating, so kids can overeat or undereat, sleeping, they can develop vampire sleep schedules, sleeping too much, or at times that aren't adaptive, or being insomniac, or in cases of kids who might have body image challenges, exercising too much. Next slide. I'll tell you, one of the 3 points that I would really like to stress in this presentation is the importance of sleep. We have a real problem in our country about teens not getting enough sleep. Only about 40% of teens are getting what the National Sleep Foundation recommends a night, which is 8.5 to 9.5 hours sleep. One of my favorite parenting books is called Nurture Shock by Bronson and Merriman, and their chapter in there, The Lost Hour, does a nice job of reviewing the science on sleep. For instance, 1 hour of less sleep than a teen needs appears to cost 7 IQ points the next day. It also seems to cause kids to function at 2 grades lower. We also see, interestingly, and I'm sure parents who have teens can relate to this, that the brain does not code pleasant memories as well. The brain forgets the good stuff when it hasn't gotten enough sleep, and it more remembers the bad stuff. In one research study of sleep-deprived college students, they were given lists of negative words, hatred, bitter, lists of positive words, hugs, puppies, asked to remember both lists, and if they were sleep-deprived, they can remember 81% of the negative words, but only 31% of the positive ones. And we see this also when people are depressed, that the good stuff bounces off. The bad stuff gets into the kitchen. And so when kids are sleep deprived, this is more likely to happen. Next slide, please. This is another illustration of the sedentary activities that teens will do if left to their own devices. And another line of research by the Kaiser Foundation separated those numbers out. So we know that when kids are texting, they may also be watching TV, or may also be online doing multiple things. And if you separated them out, it added up to about 8.5 hours a day of this activity. Next slide. Of course, we're seeing that kids are skipping meals. Some of that because they're running and gunning, you know. Some of that is as Americans, we tend to share more meals in automobiles than we do around kitchen tables. So some of it's that, but also they just don't understand the importance of some of these meals. So collectively, when we consider some of these slides I've been reviewing, we see that we have a major problem with this country, that most kids who need mental health service don't get it. Our research suggests that by adulthood, about 90% of kids will have had a mental health issue. We're talking about some of them tonight. But only about 20% of those kids get any kind of care for it. So the degree of the problem is similar to dental health or physical health, where most kids, by the time they're adults, will have had a physical ailment, a lot of times minor, but they'll have them, and dental problems too. But we don't say that only 20% of our kids who need dental care get it, and only 20% of our kids who need pediatric care get it. But that's what happens with mental health care, and it's a real social justice problem. Next slide. So what are the signs when that shell's starting to crack? Irritability, anger, talked about some of that, excessive worry, not sleeping well, problems with eating. Substance abuse is a real problem among teens. The Center for Disease Control every couple of years does what they call the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And the most recent edition came out a few months ago, and they showed that 41% of high school students have tried marijuana, 66% alcohol, and about a third of them regularly drink alcohol. Next slide. So what can we do about it? My favorite thing of all the things I review with parents, my #1 resilience strategy is this one: spending an hour a week of special time, one-on-one, undivided attention with each teen, each parent doing the 1 hour with each teen. We're already doing plenty of quality time. You know, we're going to ball games, we're going to events, we have family functions we do, but other things are capturing our attention as well. In special time, the only thing that's capturing my attention is my teen. The only verbs that would describe my behavior, if I'm doing it well, is paying attention, expressing praise about anything the kid's doing that's praiseworthy, and then expressing positive thoughts and feelings. I'm not teaching, I'm not correcting. And in my decades of doing this intervention with families, most parents initially underestimate how difficult it's going to be, for two reasons. First, they're surprised at how critical they are. In our efforts, in our crazy love efforts to have our kids be all they can be, we sometimes are more critical than we realize. And putting a moratorium on that for an hour a week is a challenge, but a useful challenge. Secondly, parents are surprised at how difficult it is to make this time. Because we have a myth in our country. The myth is that the time you give to your relationships, your marriage, your kids, that's the time that's left over after you've gotten stuff done that you have to get done. However, in my experience, for most families, there is no time left over after life's obligations have been met. That leftover time is as mythical as the unicorn. And so we treat our relationships like a cactus instead of the orchids they are. And any orchid treated like a cactus will wilt, but then we go ahead and we blame the relationship. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with this marriage? What's wrong with this kid that they're showing these symptoms even though I'm working my tail off for this person? So special time is an antidote to that, where I'm guaranteeing a minimal dose of attention, undivided attention each week. Next slide. So the first most important point for me is the sleep issue. The second, doing special time each week. And then the third, and that'll be my top 3, is the need for us to take care of ourselves as parents. There's too much parenting from the cross. You know, I'm only going to take care of myself after everybody else is taken care of, and that's another thing that doesn't happen many weeks. Behavior from the cross might be good for martyrdom or sainthood, but it's a very poor parenting model. It really doesn't work at all. So if I can take care of myself, not only will I be stronger, but I'll be modeling the things that mitigate some of that stress we're talking about tonight. So doing physical activity and making sure I get enough sleep. A sidebar tip 2 is to take technology out of the teen's bedroom at night, because we're seeing in our research that a lot of times kids are woken up by their peers. The bells and whistles are going off as their friend has a crisis with their girlfriend and they're throwing a text at 2 a.m. So removing that technology can be very helpful. Next slide. Okay.
Great, thank you, Dr. Palmiter.
I'm finished, so sure.
Hi, everyone. This is Erin again. Thank you so much, Dr. Palmiter. At this time, we will open it up for some questions from the audience. A reminder that there is a little questions box in the side control panel where you can type in your questions, and I'll be reading those to Dr. Palmiter. And I'll just go ahead and review that this is just informational and educational only. We can only take general questions to provide information on resources, but we can't really address any specific questions or comments about personal situations or give any diagnosis or treatment or any clinical opinions. So I'll give everyone just a minute or two to get their questions entered, and then we'll start taking some questions. Okay, we have our first question from Tracy, and it is, how do you suggest scheduling the one-on-one time with teens who are reluctant to give up their free time to hang out with their parents? And do you explain why you want this time with them?
I find each parent numbers among the world's leading experts on their kid. So in terms of how to introduce it, I would defer to your expertise on that. But there are some things you can do. One of the things is to go into your kid's bed at night, sit on the bed, or go to breakfast before school. I find a lot of teens like that. Or go to a movie of their choosing that you're okay with the rating, and get there a half hour before the commercials start. This hour a week can be broken up into 3 20-minute periods, 2 30s, or the 60. Or a long car drive with the technology off. But I would not take no as an answer. This is something that's going to happen. And if my kid, if those things didn't work and they were still fighting, I would think there's something else going on. And maybe I want to get a good child psychologist to consult with them to figure out what might be driving that, because it might be something that has nothing to do with me that could be quickly remedied by having an expert take a look.
Great, thank you. Allison wants to know what to do if your teen doesn't want to get enough sleep. They're just wanting to stay up all night.
Yeah, their brains aren't done being cooked to their mid-20s. I mean, I say I've got 3 teens myself, 1 in college, and having the 3 of them around when they're all living here made me look. I was looking at help wanted ads for oil rig work in the North Atlantic. I mean, these are like crazy people. So we have to realize that some of their judgments are not good, and they need our better judgment. And we just have to insist on this. I have a blog that you see here on the page, hecticparents.com, where I have a lot of articles about dealing with defiance, because that's probably the #1 parent question I get. Giving you a short answer, one of the things you can do that's kind of a mid-level level of sort of structure that's required is to make anything you want your kid to do, make that thing something they have to do to earn something else that matters to them. So for instance, maybe to get to bed on time, if the bedtime we said my kid needs is 10 o'clock, then if you get to bed at 10 o'clock, you've earned your cell phone for the next day. If you haven't gotten to bed by 10, you haven't earned your cell phone. So notice, it's not me taking it away. The kid either earns or doesn't earn by meeting the expectation. So I'm a benevolent bystander in this, and I'm rooting for my kid to make a choice that will allow them to earn the thing that matters to them. Now, keep in mind that in setting that up, I certainly want to try to be collaborative. I don't want to go in there all, drill instructor-like, and this is how it is, but trying to talk with them about the importance of sleep. And that book I mentioned earlier, Nurture Shock, the chapter in there, is written for lay people, and that can be an illustration. You could say to them, if you'd like to read some of the reason why I think this is so important for you, I'm happy to have you do that.
Great, thank you. And I think our National PTA President, Otha, you had something else you wanted to add on?
Yes, I want to say, in spending time with children, I have 2 children. They're adults now, 23 and 25. And one of the things I worked very hard at when they were at home was being at the evening meal. Dr. Palmer mentioned the breakfast, but sometimes just around a meal, just to take an opportunity to bond and find out how their day was. And that I found that to be successful, and also with activities, scouting and hobbies of their interest that they enjoyed doing, just taking part in those.
If I could piggyback on that too, a top interest, scholarship interest of mine, clinical interest, is the question, what does our science say? What parenting practices does our science say most promotes resilience in kids? And I spent a lot of years researching that, and that's actually the strategies I ended up putting in my parenting book. And one of the top ones, one of the top 10, is the promotion of rituals. And that's what the recommendation was we just heard, the promotion of rituals. Remember, planes may be crashing into buildings, kids may be shooting kids in school, but we still have pizza night. Or we still go to temple on the weekend. Or it almost doesn't matter what the we still is, as long as you have these regular, daily, weekly, seasonal rituals. And so a family meal is one of those. And the research on the value of family meals is overwhelmingly positive. Now, I don't want anybody, however, listening to this that thinks the family meal is completely not possible to feel bad, because other rituals can do it too. As long as you have these we always is in place. So a kid says, oh, we always do this, we always do that. Show me a family that's surrendering its rituals, and I'll show you a family that's eggs about to break open. You know, we used to go to Chuck E. Cheese for birthdays, but this year it just got to be too much. Or we used to have grandma over for Thanksgiving, but this year it just got to be too much. So rituals are a very important family factor for promoting resilience.
Great. I think those are both great points. I'll go ahead and read off our next question from Lori. And this is interesting because she's located in Colorado, and so she wants to know what your suggestions are to best help teens avoid peer pressure if they're getting involved in, turning to drug use, such as marijuana, if as a result of their stress. And she was pointing out they have an especially large issue with that over there in Colorado.
Yeah, right. A lot of kids are taking some of the legal issues about marijuana as a rhetorical argument for why they ought to be able to use it. You know, one of the words, I've taught child psychopathology, adolescent psychopathology for years, and there was a verb that kept coming up over and over and over and over and over again across disorders, and in regards to parenting behavior. And this M word is so powerful. And the M word is monitoring. Monitoring. That is another one of those 10 top resilience promoting factors. I, as a parent of a teenager, need to know a few things. Where are they? Who are they with? What are they doing? And what adult's responsible for monitoring? And that monitoring might be, from the parking lot while they're inside at the movies, or it might be they're upstairs and the kid party's downstairs. But those 4 questions, I need to have those answered. And that's another thing I would not take. I would not accept a reality where I couldn't answer all 4 of those questions. When kids are monitored, they don't use substances. They don't engage in sexual activity. They don't do all kinds of risky things that get them into ERs and headlines in newspapers. They avoid those things when their parents know who are they with, what are they doing, where are they, and what adult's responsible for the monitoring. And parents, by the way, one of the thoughts, sorry, I get worked up about this stuff, and partially it's because I have these teens and I engage in these things all the time with them too, is partnering with other parents. Parents are wonderful partners with this. On the sidelines of ball games. Tonight I was in the sideline of a ball game, and my son, my middle teenager, has a prom Friday, and we were all coordinating. All the parents were coordinating on how we're going to do that and make sure our kids are not a statistic in the paper this weekend.
Great point. Thank you. Our next question is from Kate, and I think that she probably means for also including mental health. She wants to know, what trends are we seeing in schools as far as wellness programs? What are teens being taught in a typical school wellness program?
I don't know. I do know that there are efforts to bring resilience programs to school. There's very, very few of them that I know of. The University of Pennsylvania has one that they try to get into schools. I'll tell you, it ought to be that way. There's another field called positive psychology. And when you ask the question, what can parents do to promote resilience in their kids? And the second question, what can parents do to promote happiness in their kids? The answers to those questions are the same things. And our science is real clear on this, and so there are programs in positive psychology that could be easily imported into schools. But in terms of how many schools use them, I'm sorry that I don't know.
Okay, our next question is from Monica, and she wants to know, at what point would they want to seek professional help from a psychologist or psychiatrist if they're noticing stress in their teens or any of these warning signs?
I would think of it like I would a toothache. Your kid might come home and they're saying they have a toothache, and maybe they bit down on something, they have a little inflammation, it's not a big thing, you give it a little time, you watch it, you do some homeopathic things, but then if it persists or worsens, then you get an expert on the job. Now, maybe it's a little bit different with mental health. You might go a little bit longer, but I wouldn't go, if it's a serious problem where my kid's talking about self-harm or harming others, or they're afraid to go to school, or they're deliberately throwing up their meal. If it's something serious like that, I would just do it right away. If it's something more where it seems like they're stressed out, they're more irritable than you think is good, they're becoming more withdrawn than they normally would, I wouldn't let that go on longer than a period of 2 weeks before I would reach out to a lean, mean healing machine and try to get an expert in there to help me to understand what's going on.
Great, thank you. Gil wants to know, how do you balance poor time management around homework for a child who is slow getting their homework done versus just setting a hard deadline for lights out?
Oh boy, that is such an important question. Thank you for it, because it really allows me to say what I think are some pretty important things. First of all, I've asked so many teachers at so many school districts this question. Is it possible for teens in your school district to do 3 things? 1, do the homework that you've assigned. 2, have 1 extracurricular activity during the school year. 3, get 8.5 to 9.5 hours sleep a night. And not one time have I heard a teacher say it's possible to do all 3 things. And the place there that I think has the most give is with the homework. And I think we need to do a better job at communicating with schools about homework issues. I've spent a lot of time talking with schools about this, and I find a few things happen. First of all, a lot of high school teachers don't know what the other high school teachers are assigning. Or they want to coordinate, they're aware they're given too much homework, but there's a blockage in the district. They're not allowed. So I've heard teachers say, why can't we have Tuesdays and Thursdays is history, English, and math, and then Mondays and Wednesdays are chemistry, language, and whatever, sociology, and divide it up like that. So teachers want to do this. Another thing to keep in mind is what's called the 10-minute guideline. Research suggests that if you take the grade a kid is in and multiply by 10 minutes, that amount of time doing the homework is usually the best that promotes learning. So if a sixth grader is 60 minutes, and the research suggests that when you start going over that time, that there's a diminishing return on the academic learning. So another thing that happens is kids are asked to do the same bit of learning over and over and over again, to repeat it. So you've already demonstrated on question number 3 your knowledge of this, and now go ahead and repeat it another 2 or 3 times. I think finally another thing that goes on in high schools, and I love the documentary Race to Nowhere. Of the documentaries I've seen, it's the best one that articulates this issue. Race to Nowhere is a documentary suggesting that we're all on this treadmill for, in quotes, a good college, end quotes. What does that mean exactly? What is a good college? And a lot of these college admissions officers, I've got 1 kid in college now, 2 coming up. You go around and they'll tell you at some of the schools that maybe have admissions rates where they're admitting 50% or lower of their applicants. And they'll tell you grades and SATs are not enough anymore. It's not enough. You got to have the thing. You got to be excelling in your extracurriculars. And I think this quest for being this phenomenal college applicant is making a lot of our kids sick. And sometimes that might be worth it. But I think we should go forward with more consciousness about what is a good college. What does that mean? I mean, is the college that's admitting 75% of their kids, are the kids in that college going to have a significantly different outcome than the colleges that are admitting 40%? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's a good one. But when I have a kid who's making themselves sick because of the amount of homework they have, extracurriculars, it's just getting to be too much, I think. Race to Nowhere, by the way, is available on iTunes. I have nothing to do with the film, but it's available on iTunes. I looked the other night to make sure. So you could, and it also is on Amazon, that documentary. I would wish it be shown in all school districts. I think it's a great It promotes, it doesn't answer a lot, but it does promote a lot of the right kind of questions. And they review that 10-minute rule in there too.
Great, thank you so much. We have another question about if there's a way to maybe separate or differentiate between teens who actually are experiencing incredibly high levels of stress versus maybe those who they're saying are just looking for reactions, are wanting to maybe act out or maybe be a little bit melodramatic is I think what they're trying.
Yeah, like are they just trying to get attention, in other words? You know, I think about that, I get that a fair amount too. That's another great question. And let's say a kid came up to us and go, you know, I'm really hungry, can I have some food? I think most of us, as long as we determined that the kid wasn't overeating, would rush to meet that need. When a kid acts out because they need attention, sometimes the knee-jerk reactions go, well, don't, you know, let's just ignore them. Well, certainly we don't want to reinforce negative behavior, but I do want to try to meet the need for attention that a kid is having. Kids are like their behavior is like tree branches. Tree branches grow their branches around obstacles towards the light. Kids grow their behavior towards that which gets them attention. So if a kid is feeling low and their needs for attention are not being met, they will, in ways that we know they're not conscious of, do things to try to get attention. So for instance, I do a lot of work with parents that have a child who's defiant. And one of the things we talk about is how most of us have a kid who's defiant. Without knowing it, we're rewarding it. It's not an obvious thing. And one way is by yelling at them. And you think, well, what's rewarding about getting yelled at? I mean, that's not very pleasant. But imagine you were offered right now a tray of unwashed radishes. You'd probably turn it down because you've eaten today, and that's not a very good food. But imagine you hadn't eaten in 2 weeks. I mean, you'd be like Scarlett O'Hara and Gone from the Wind and tear into those radishes because you're starved. So a lot of kids are so starved for attention that even though getting yelled at's a raw radish, there's the attention, there's the connection, and so they do it. I think we don't want to give them attention for negative behaviors, but what I do want to do is have that hour a week of special time. I think that's the antidote for the drama queens or the drama kings who are trying to get attention in negative ways, to have that regular, consistent dose of special time. And I'll tell you, I have story after story of parents talking about how special time changed their relationship with their kid for the better. I'm thinking of one dad off the top, real quick story. He was a single parent, which, I mean, that ought to be a straight shot to heaven if you're a single parent. The amount of stress single parents endure is incredible, and you are such wonderful, selfless people. So he's a single parent. He can't get his 13-year-old to do her homework. Now, he's also the vice president of a large international company. He's paid about $500,000 a year because he's so good at solving problems, but he couldn't solve this one. He couldn't get his teenager to do her homework. And it was so frustrating to him, I think in part because he was so successful at solving problems at work. So we brought her in. The first thing I had him do was special time. And he did it on politeness, but he came back the following week, and I asked him what it was like, and he was polite again, but he's kind of, I can't wait till we get to the homework because that's really why I'm here. So I asked the 13-year-old what it was like for her. And like a lot of teens, she said, I don't know. So I said, well, if sitting in the front row of a Michael Jackson concert is a 10, and this was before all Michael Jackson's troubles, and he was like at the apex of his career, and she was obsessed with him. Front row of Michael Jackson concert is a 10, eating a warm cupcake is a 1, what was this? And with a tear in her eye and a quivering lip, she said it was a 10. The dad then opened his mouth like he thought I was a dentist. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had lost track of his power, his superpower with his daughter that he rediscovered once he started doing this hour a week of undivided attention.
Thank you. That's a great story, and that also segues perfectly into the next question, which was, what other strategies do you use to increase that parent commitment to creating that special time, and also modeling other healthy coping behaviors to the stress?
One of my favorite things, because a lot of times I find when I'm covering special time, and I've done this myself. Let me cop to something too. I was prescribing special time for years before I started doing it myself with my own kids. And I just kept imagining this neon sign, hypocrite, over my clients' heads. So I either had to get sunglasses or start doing it. And I was surprised at how powerful it was. But parents do, when they're first introduced to it, a lot of them will say, boy, it's hard to find the time. And I say to them, well, because there is no time left over, there is no finding it. It only becomes what important thing's not going to get done so this can get done. And I have an exercise I have parents do. It's the very first thing that I have readers do in my parenting book. And I don't have the time to do it with you now, but I can tell you what I do is ask people to imagine they're going to a funeral, and I walk them through some scenes where they're imagining the sights and sounds of the day, the morning, doing the commute, arriving at the funeral, and then about 5 to 7 minutes into the exercise, they're walking up to the casket and they look in and they see it's them lying in the casket. It's their funeral, but they're conscious and awake, and they start thinking about first what they most value about their life. Do that a couple minutes, and then think about what their regrets are for a couple minutes, and then I have them reflect on what people will say about them. See, the gift of death to the living is wisdom, tremendous perspective and wisdom, and I find most people have a deep well of wisdom when they consider a question from the context of a deathbed. When you look at the transcripts of people in the Twin Towers when they knew they were facing death, or you look at the book Tuesdays with Morrie, A Wise Professor Dying, or look at YouTube, the last lecture series on YouTube, people facing death have the same wisdoms, and it's all about love. It's all about connection. It's all about these people that I'm crazy in love with, that I wish I had more time for. So I have parents do this, and I don't have to sell them anything then. They just found their wisdom unlocked within themselves by considering the question from the context of their deathbed.
Great, thank you. That's a really powerful and moving anecdote. Another great point someone brought up is that we mentioned sports or physical activity as a strategy to lower stress. But what do you do if the sport that you turned to originally for relief from the stress suddenly becomes so competitive that it is a root of stress now?
I have to laugh because I'm living it. My son is, you could actually, if you looked him up, if you Googled him, you could find him. He's a baseball player. He's a junior in high school. And on the sidelines with other parents, we're constantly asking ourselves these existential questions about what this all means. And I'll tell you, I'm still figuring some of it out myself as I live it with my own family. But I think a good question is, whatever investment the kid's putting into it, how do they feel about it? Do they enjoy it? Does it seem worth it to them? The outcome what is the outcome they're pursuing? And does that outcome seem viable? And is it worth the investment? For me and my family, we've had our rainy Mondays and dark times where we really wondered if the time we were putting into baseball is worth it, but we've really decided together that it very much is, because of how much life it gives and the value we get from it. But the answer to the next family might be very different. Once you've seen one family, you've seen one family, and that same question can be answered very different. I think those are the things I would wonder, though. Is it fun? Is it worth it? This expense, the time, the resource, is it helping us viably reach a goal that matters collectively to us?
Great, and I think that also brings up a good point of, is there maybe some good, healthy amount of stress versus, it's maybe not all necessarily bad, unhealthy stress?
Absolutely. And I think that many of us need some of that to be on a high road in life, to really be doing the things we want to do in our vocational lives, whether that's a vocation in the home or outside the home, and our personal lives. So that stress can motivate us. We know we have to pay the mortgage. We know we have the client appointment tomorrow that we have to be ready for. So those things get us going. I think it's when we start developing some of these symptoms that we've been talking about, whether it's adult or teen. Then you start thinking that maybe the tapping on the eggshell is getting too much, and we might be getting close to a breakage if we don't do something different.
Great point. We have another parent who wants to know how they can encourage or support their child if they might feel like they're not meeting the parents' expectations, even when they do tell them, I'm proud of you, in regards to grades or activities, community involvement, etc.
Awesome. Boy, these are great questions, because that leads to another top 10 resilience factor, the promotion of competencies. I don't have the time to show you, to share with you the science behind this. I just ask you to take it on faith that it's grounded in good empiricism. Everybody has top strengths. Assuming a person doesn't have brain damage, everybody has top strengths. And by that I mean you have to travel far and wide to find someone as good at that thing as you. The challenge, however, is a lot of kids don't know what their top strengths are. Maybe because the only thing they have access to is where the herd is going. So if I'm lucky, where the herd is going is a top strength of my kid. Basketball, grades, dating, whatever. But if my kid's top strength lays on a path less traveled, then I have to be more aware and persistent in finding that. Having access to my top strength and manifesting it in the world in a way that matters is the antidote to the question is concerned about. Because if I am manifesting my top strength and people are seeing that, that is half of the game when it comes to self-esteem. The other half of self-esteem is that connection with people that matter that Special Time promotes. There are some survey tools that are available that I can direct you to. The University of Pennsylvania on their website, AuthenticHappiness.com, has a questionnaire for kids and teens called the VIA, that stands for Values and Actions Character Strength Questionnaire. They keep changing the name, but VIA is in there. It's a free one, and it will spit back a theory on your kid's top 5 personality strengths. I once had a kid I was treating for depression, and the teenager, and we were about 80% home, but we weren't getting all the way home, and we were frustrated, and I had him do this, and it came back that a top personality strength of his was his spirituality, which was a surprise to his parents and me, and we arranged for him to manifest that in his church group, and the rest of his depression went away almost overnight. Another tool is called Strength Finder 2.0. That's available on Amazon. It's a little book. Buy the little book, and they give you the code to unlock their online survey, where you can do a survey which will also kick back theories. These are not tablets coming down the mountain. These are theories about what your kid's top strengths might be. And you keep going as a parent. You keep going and going and going, and then when you see your kid is just excelling in this thing. It might be one of my boys, the parents and I, the dad was a jock and wanted his boy to be a jock. The kid would injure himself if he tried to catch a baseball. He just had none of that in him. He would write all this poetry in his room, and the parents just were aware of it but didn't make anything of it, and we consider where that was a top strength, and in fact was. They submitted it for publication, and the kid got national attention. So that's basically the quest, is to try to find the top strengths.
And that, I think, plays really well into another question that we had, and it was right after the sports question. What if your student or your child hates sports and they try a bunch of different ones? None of them really resonate with them, and they just would rather be, doing activities that are not as physical, like maybe reading or painting or something like that.
I would absolutely go with that. I mean, I want my kid to have physical activity, but that can be brisk walking around the mall as we shop for dresses. It could be any number of ways to get that physical activity. But I think that we have sometimes way too much of pushing kids in directions that they don't want to go. Now, I'm all for favor once a commitment's been made to see it through. Just because a kid had a bad practice, we don't let them quit, obviously. But if as a theme my kid's telling me that sports are not for me, then I would treat them the way I would want to be treated by my boss. If I said, this certain activity, it's just not for me, I would want my boss to go, okay, well, what is your activity then?
Great point. And we've had several questions that are all kind of related to this issue, so I'll just go ahead and kind of consolidate all of them. One being that homework that could actually run late into the night to interfere with their sleep, and then also the amount of homework that's being assigned to their students. One parent has a student who has 2 quizzes every single week, and that's a huge factor for stress. And so how do you address that with the teachers or the school?
I think it is a dialogue, and it's best done face-to-face with parent and teacher. On my blog, you'll find several articles for strategies for having these meetings. I think I would also consider bringing in a child psychologist with you. This is not an adversarial thing. This is let's collaborate. Teacher, this is now, we're a good 15, 20 minutes in the discussion now, and the blog articles tell you what the front part of it would be. But in the meat, you're saying, how much time do you think would be good for kids to spend on homework? Do you know how much time my kid's spending on homework? Do you think that's good? It's amazing how often our points can be better made with question marks at the end than periods or exclamation points. And I find teachers are a mission-driven lot. They are in it because they want to make a difference. I mean, some of them have lost their way because of stress, but rarely will I find the teacher that got into it because they wanted to make a lot of money. I mean, if they did, they had bad vocational counseling. I mean, they're in it because they want to make a difference in kids' lives. And I think if I can approach it in a collaborative way, a lot of times they're willing to make adjustment. That said, at the end of the day, if your kid's doing those AP honors classes and they have that extracurricular activity, there is, in fact, I got to tell you, I don't know a way around for them not to lose some sleep. My teens have been through that. There are times where you just kind of have to have the wisdom of Solomon. You're aware of all the factors, and you know your best solution tonight is some sleep deprivation. You don't like it, but you've done what you can with the school. The extracurricular is too important, and so you're living with it.
Great. I did have a follow-up from the parent with the non-athletic student about other suggestions for healthy physical activities. I'm not sure that we might be able to provide enough satisfactory answers. I will point out maybe just off the top of my head, I'm thinking not as competitive, perhaps, maybe individual physical activities.
Oh, sure. And that's another thing. I mean, APA has a blog, Your Mind, Your Body. I'm pretty sure it's .org. And then where they have articles suggesting physical activity, and you can find also on mine, hecticparents.com, lots of suggestions. I mean, more suggestions than you would ever have time to do. And these can be incorporated into family life. So we're parking the furthest slot at the Walmart. We're not parking the closest one, and we're making a game out of who can get up the stairs faster and not taking the escalator and the elevator. There's all kinds of ways of having it be fun. I'm not a big fan of getting on the treadmill with white-knuckle willpower. I mean, willpower is an unreliable vehicle. It's just not that reliable. And so I prefer to be creative about fun and collaborative physical activity. And there's lots of suggestions on those two blog sites I just mentioned.
Great, thank you. Looks like we just have a couple more questions. One of the next ones is any information or resources that we might have to share about stress and how it affects students in special education.
I'm sorry, would you say that last one again?
Yes, how stress might affect students who are in special education.
Right. Wow, that's another very powerful question. I think for me with special education, so much of that is how good is the initial evaluation? Is it have a true understanding of a kid's strengths too. So many evaluations that we do on our kids do not evaluate their strengths simultaneously and communicate those back. Does the special education plan access the strengths and talk about how this kid's strengths should be used in the curriculum? That's first and foremost, because that can do a lot for the self-esteem issue that's there. I also think we want to consider having as much inclusion as possible, and only in situations where it's just not in the kid's best interest to be in the general ed classroom would we want to go and put them in a different setting. Sometimes that's necessary. We have to do that. In those instances that I'm really looking, I'll give you just one example, and this is Dr. Robert Brooks's idea. He's a Harvard psychologist. He asked kids who are in special ed and all kids receiving interventions at schools to be put on display for some positive and unique contribution to the school. Something no other kid's doing. That's a kid that raises and lowers the school flag or takes care of helps the janitors at lunch, or one principal bought a hamster just so my kid could take care of it, the kid I was serving. So being on display like that can be helpful too.
Great, thank you. Let's see, let me go back up here to read the next one. Okay, this is a good one. How would you balance keeping your child's trust when it comes to acting on any information they may have shared with you about maybe a friend that is engaging in dangerous behaviors as a result of maybe feeling overly stressed?
If it's anything that could be life-threatening, then I think that I would try to work collaboratively with my teen about that reality and figure out what's an acceptable mode of communication back to the parent. We can't allow a kid's life to be in danger, and that would be the message. So I could be collaborative with my teen about what that method might be. If I thought for some reason that that would significantly worsen my teen, and it was a life-death issue, then I would just take it upon myself and ask the other parent, or if I'm using the school to communicate it, ask the school to please respect that I don't want it coming back where the source of the information was coming from.
Great. Let's see, what is the next one? Internet use is a very big issue in this household, but of course, internet is absolutely necessary to complete homework. What is a good balance as far as monitoring the time spent on the computer? If the child is saying that it's all for homework, they want to express that they trust the child's judgment, but sometimes they feel like maybe there's a little bit too much time spent online.
There's lots of devices available for parents. The website Family Safe Media is one that has multiple gadgets for some of those issues. There's software called Spectre that'll actually record how computers being used. Now, we have to find the middle ground with that. As implied in some of the questions, I'm not looking to be a spy on my kid. If they're successful, if there aren't symptoms, I'm doing very little of that. If there are symptoms and they're not being successful, then I'm doing a little bit more until I figure out what the problem is so I can correct it. And I think that's part of the monitoring too. And I have blog articles on monitoring technology that you can find, because I think that if a kid is abusing that, then having some of those controls in place would be in order.
Great. And looks like I have one last question. For perhaps a child that may already be facing some mental health issues, I think resources that parents can turn to, especially when they're not sure, where else to turn other than, a pediatrician, or they're maybe not getting enough resources from their insurance or healthcare provider.
Yeah, and I have articles on that too. Let me just suggest with you a premise. And I've worked in multiple parts of the country, and I got my doctorate in '89, so I've been doing this a while, and I've never seen a case where if a parent wasn't persistent and creative, that money ever had to be an obstacle. I'll give this one quick example because time's short. If you live by a university that has a graduate program in psychology, they probably have a training clinic, a mental health clinic, where graduate students, doctoral students, are doing the care under supervision of seasoned faculty. We have one at Marywood, where I teach in Scranton, and our average fee there is $10 a visit. There are sliding scale agencies all over the country, community mental health centers. There are all kinds of possible solutions. Now, the first 2, 3 I may get may not be the ones that fit for me, but I find with persistence and creativity you can find it. And I think we're going to see here as a resource in the last slide, a place where you can find a psychologist locator. And a lot of psychologists, they're very generous people. You can call them up and maybe they're not a fit for you, but they're willing to tell you in your community where you can get services that will be affordable for you. I do that all the time for people in my community, even those who don't come to me.
Great, thank you. And I think that's a great point that even if you are seeking out a mental health care provider, that it might not be an immediate fit. I think, would you feel like that's a correct assessment, Dr. Palmiter?
Yeah, and one of the chapters of my parenting book too is about how to find, what's a good sign of good mental health care? What are you looking for? And I would keep looking until I had those elements in place. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement what you said.
Great. And as Dr. Palmiter mentioned, here are some other resources you can find at the APA website, www.apa.org/help center. They have a list of resources there. You can find help with locating a psychologist at psychologistlocator.org. Mentalhealth.gov is another one, and you can also follow the APA on Twitter. And then here are some of our PTA resources. I hope that all of you will get involved with your PTA if you're not already. And if President Otha is still on, I'd love to have him give a couple words.
Well, he's coming on.
I'm still on. I was on mute. I would like to thank everyone this evening. Dr. Palmer, thank you very much, and our other panelists for the work, and I hope our parents and other folks tonight have enjoyed this, and staff, I thank you for your work in putting this together. I look forward to future webinars in the future and making sure that all of our children and teenagers receive the best in their emotional and mental well-being. And thank you very much. Y'all have a good evening.
Great. Dr. Palmer, was there something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say that, parents are the most selfless people. Is there a greater love than loving someone more than your own life? And that's what most parents do. So bless you all. And if there's anything besides the resources you saw, you want to be in touch with me, additionally with other questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. And did we have I think we had your contact information. I can pull that back up right there.
And my email is very easy. It's just palmiter@marywood.edu.
Great.
Just my last name at marywood.edu.
Wonderful. And for all attendees, I will reiterate, I know that some of you already saw my typed message earlier, but this was a recorded presentation. We will be publishing the recording on pta.org. We will also be emailing out the link for the recording as soon as it becomes available, which should happen within the next day or so. So again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a great evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.